What makes a British thriller different from everything else on streaming right now? It isn't explosions or spectacle, it's pressure, quiet dread, moral tension, stories that creep instead of sprint. Today we're counting down the top 10 British thriller movies on Prime right now. Films that trap you in rooms, minds, and decisions where escape feels impossible. Number 10. Villain, 2020. Villain is the kind of British crime thriller that feels like it slipped out of an earlier, rougher era of UK cinema. Blunt, bruising, and completely uninterested in glamour. Craig Fairbrass plays Eddie Franks, an aging enforcer released from prison after 10 long years, only to discover that the world he protected is already falling apart. His wife is dying. His brother has made catastrophic decisions, and the criminal underworld Eddie once ruled has moved on without him. What makes Villain work is its refusal to romanticize violence. Every punch lands with exhaustion behind it. Eddie isn't a rising gangster. He's a man whose power is fading, whose reputation no longer scares the right people, and whose moral compass only activates when family is threatened. The film leans heavily into themes British thrillers do best: loyalty, regret, and the cost of survival in a city that chews people up quietly. The London presented here isn't flashy or stylized. It's gray, cramped, and transactional. Violence happens in small rooms, back alleys, and kitchens, places that feel uncomfortably real. Fairbrass gives one of his most grounded performances, portraying a man who knows every violent choice only shortens the little time he has left. When Villain arrived, it was largely dismissed as another straight-to-streaming crime flick. But audiences slowly discovered its emotional spine, a thriller less about winning and more about settling debts before it's too late. It's tough, unsentimental, and deeply British in its restraint. Number 9. Khloe, 2022. Khloe is a psychological thriller built on obsession, envy, and the terrifying ease of identity theft in the digital age. At first glance, it looks like a familiar setup. A woman becomes fixated on another woman's seemingly perfect life. But Khloe quickly reveals itself as something far darker and more intimate. Erin Doherty plays Becky, a lonely young woman watching Khloe through social media, admiring her friends, her career, her effortless confidence. When Khloe suddenly dies under suspicious circumstances, Becky inserts herself into Khloe's inner circle by adopting a new identity. What follows isn't a conventional mystery, but a slow psychological unraveling where Becky begins to lose track of who she really is. The genius of Khloe lies in its atmosphere. The series weaponizes silence, awkward pauses, and social discomfort. Every scene carries tension because Becky is constantly one mistake away from exposure. The thriller elements aren't driven by chases or violence, but by conversations, glances, and the fear of being seen too clearly. British thrillers excel when they turn everyday spaces into psychological traps, and Khloe does exactly that. Dinner parties, offices, and living rooms become pressure cookers. When the truth finally surfaces, the series reframes everything you thought you understood. Initially overshadowed by louder international thrillers, Khloe has aged into a cult favorite for viewers who prefer tension that crawls under the skin rather than explodes on screen. Number 8. Last Breath, 2025. Last Breath is a survival thriller that strips suspense down to its most primal element: time running out. Based on real events, the film follows deep-sea saturation divers operating hundreds of feet below the North Sea when a catastrophic accident leaves one man trapped on the ocean floor with only minutes of oxygen remaining. What separates Last Breath from standard disaster thrillers is its cold realism. There's no heroic swelling music, no over-explained dialogue. The tension comes from procedure, checklists, radio silence, malfunctioning equipment. The ocean itself becomes an invisible antagonist, pressing in from all sides. The film's British sensibility shows in its restraint. Characters don't monologue about fear, they suppress it. Panic is internal. Decisions are made with grim efficiency, knowing that any mistake could kill someone they consider family. Claustrophobic camera work and muted sound design amplify the sense of isolation, making every second feel unbearably long. When Last Breath arrived on Prime, it didn't come with blockbuster marketing, But word of mouth quickly turned it into a sleeper hit among thriller fans who appreciate realism over spectacle. It's not about beating the odds, it's about whether human resolve can outlast physics. By the time the final moments arrive, Last Breath leaves you emotionally drained, reminded that the most terrifying thrillers don't need villains, just reality closing in. Number 7. Locked, 2023. Locked is a single-location British thriller that understands one crucial rule of suspense: limitation creates terror. The entire film revolves around a man who steals what he believes is an unattended luxury SUV, only to discover he has walked into a meticulously engineered trap. Once the doors seal shut, escape becomes nearly impossible, and the clock begins ticking. The brilliance of Locked lies in how quickly it removes comfort. The vehicle becomes a prison. Air becomes a commodity. Communication is restricted. The antagonist remains mostly unseen, turning the situation into a psychological duel rather than a physical one. Every small victory is temporary, and every mistake compounds the danger. British thrillers often excel at stripping characters down to moral decisions, and Locked uses its premise to explore guilt, punishment, and accountability. The man inside the vehicle is not an innocent victim, but the film refuses to turn him into a cartoon villain. Instead, it asks an uncomfortable question: how far does justice go before it becomes cruelty? The confined cinematography intensifies the experience. Close-ups linger too long. Silence becomes threatening. Even the hum of electronics feels oppressive. What could have been a gimmick is elevated by strong pacing and a refusal to offer easy relief. When Locked appeared on Prime, it arrived quietly, quickly becoming one of those late-night discoveries that viewers recommend with urgency. It's lean, relentless, and designed to make you physically uncomfortable, exactly what a good thriller should do. Number 6. The Assassin, 2024. The Assassin is a British thriller series built around inevitability. It follows a former contract killer who has tried, unsuccessfully, to leave violence behind. Retirement in this world is not an ending. It is merely a pause before consequences catch up. Unlike louder international counterparts, The Assassin operates on quiet dread. The threat isn't immediate explosions or gunfire, it's memory. Past actions resurface slowly, deliberately, through people who refuse to forget. Each episode tightens the noose, reminding the protagonist that survival always demands payment. The series excels at atmosphere. Locations are bleak, anonymous, and emotionally distant. Dialogue is sparse but loaded. Every conversation feels like a negotiation where lives are the currency. Violence, when it arrives, is abrupt and unsettling rather than choreographed. What truly elevates The Assassin is its character work. The central figure isn't glamorous or remorseful in the expected ways. He understands what he is and what he's done without seeking forgiveness. The tension comes from watching how long discipline and experience can hold back chaos. Initially overlooked amid flashier releases, The Assassin has grown into a word-of-mouth favorite among viewers who prefer slow-burn thrillers with moral weight. It's patient, grim, and unmistakably British in its refusal to over-explain itself. Number 5. Dead Hot, 2024. Dead Hot is proof that British thrillers can blend tone without losing tension. On the surface, it presents itself as a mystery wrapped in dark humor. Beneath that surface, however, lies a sharp psychological thriller about disappearance, reinvention, and the lies people tell to survive. The story follows a man whose partner vanished years earlier under suspicious circumstances. When new information begins to surface, the investigation forces him to confront truths he has actively avoided. What starts as curiosity quickly turns into obsession, and the past refuses to stay buried. What makes Dead Hot distinctive is its tonal control. Humor is never allowed to deflate the suspense. It sharpens it. Awkward moments, social discomfort, and emotional evasions all become tools of tension. The series understands that laughter and fear often occupy the same emotional space. British settings play a crucial role here. Ordinary flats, cafes, and streets become loaded with memory and unease. No place feels safe because familiarity itself becomes threatening. As secrets unravel, the show shifts gears, revealing itself as far darker than it initially appears. When Dead Hot arrived on Prime, it surprised audiences expecting a light mystery. Instead, they found a thriller that quietly tightens its grip, delivering one of the more emotionally complex British suspense stories in recent years. Number 4. Eden, 2024. Eden is a British thriller that weaponizes isolation. Set in a remote, almost mythic landscape, the film follows a small group drawn together by the promise of escape, renewal, or profit, only to discover that nature is not their greatest threat. Each character arrives carrying secrets, and the land itself seems to sense weakness. Unlike high-concept survival films that rely on spectacle, Eden builds dread slowly. Silence dominates. Wide shots emphasize distance and vulnerability. The absence of civilization becomes suffocating rather than liberating. This is a thriller where nothing happens quickly, and that's exactly why it works. British thrillers have long understood that menace doesn't need explanation, and Eden leans into ambiguity. Motivations are unclear. Trust erodes subtly. Conversations feel guarded, as though everyone is holding back one crucial truth. When violence finally erupts, it feels inevitable rather than shocking. And what elevates Eden above similar genre entries is its psychological focus. Survival is not just physical, it's emotional and moral. Characters are forced to confront who they really are when stripped of routine, law, and social performance. The film suggests that paradise is only ever one decision away from becoming a prison. When Eden landed on Prime, it didn't arrive with noise or hype. But for viewers drawn to atmospheric thrillers that linger long after the credits roll, it's become a quiet favorite, the kind of film discovered late at night and remembered for weeks. Number 3. The Girlfriend, 2023. The Girlfriend is a modern British psychological thriller that thrives on discomfort. At its core, it explores manipulation disguised as intimacy, the kind that creeps in slowly, masked as concern, affection, and emotional support. Nothing here feels overtly threatening at first, which makes the descent all the more unsettling. The story centers on a relationship that appears ordinary from the outside but begins to fracture under scrutiny. Small comments become controlling. Kind gestures turn strategic. The tension builds not through action but through emotional imbalance. One character always seems to hold just a little more power. What the film does exceptionally well is perspective. Scenes are framed to make the audience question intent. Is this love? Is this obsession? Or is this something far more dangerous? The ambiguity keeps the viewer constantly reassessing what they're seeing. British thrillers excel at social realism, and The Girlfriend uses familiar domestic spaces as battlegrounds. Kitchens, bedrooms, and living rooms become arenas of psychological warfare. There's no escape into spectacle. The threat is intimate and unavoidable. When The Girlfriend appeared on Prime, it resonated strongly with viewers who appreciate thrillers grounded in emotional truth rather than sensational twists. It's the kind of film that feels disturbingly plausible, making it far more unsettling than louder genre entries. Number 2. No Time to Die, 2021. While often discussed as an action spectacle, No Time to Die is, at heart, one of the darkest British thrillers in the Bond canon. This is not a film about gadgets or bravado, it's about consequence. Time has passed, Bond's age, mistakes linger, and survival no longer feels guaranteed. Daniel Craig's final outing strips the character down to something far more vulnerable. The thriller elements dominate: surveillance, betrayal, biological threats, and a villain whose menace comes from quiet certainty rather than theatrical excess. The stakes are personal, global, and irreversible. What makes No Time to Die stand apart is its pacing. It allows tension to breathe. Conversations carry weight. Silence is often more threatening than action. The film leans heavily into espionage paranoia. Who can be trusted, and for how long? British identity permeates the film, from its restrained emotional beats to its refusal to offer an easy escape from consequence. This is a thriller about endings, not just missions, but identities. Though widely seen, No Time to Die has aged into something more respected than celebrated, a somber, unusually reflective British thriller hiding inside a blockbuster frame. Number 1. Last Night in Soho, 2021. Last Night in Soho is the rare British thriller that feels like a fever dream, seductive, terrifying, and emotionally disorienting all at once. Edgar Wright abandons his usual kinetic comedy style and instead crafts a psychological descent into obsession, memory, and the cost of nostalgia. The film follows a young fashion student in modern London who begins experiencing vivid visions of the city's glamorous past. At first, the 1960s appear intoxicating: neon lights, music, elegance, promise. But as the visions intensify, the past reveals its cruelty. Glamour curdles into exploitation, dreams rot into nightmares. What makes Last Night in Soho extraordinary is how it weaponizes style. Color, music, and camera movement aren't decoration. They're narrative tools. Mirrors fracture identity. Sound bleeds between decades. The city itself becomes predatory, feeding on longing and innocence. This is a British thriller deeply concerned with power, particularly how young ambition can be manipulated by systems that smile while destroying you. The horror isn't supernatural in the traditional sense. It's historical, cyclical, the suggestion that progress doesn't erase cruelty, it just repackages it. When the film was released, reactions were divided. Some expected comfort. Instead, they received confrontation. Over time, Last Night in Soho has emerged as one of the most daring British thrillers of the decade, visually hypnotic, emotionally bruising, and far more bitter than its surface suggests. It's not an easy watch, but it's an unforgettable one. British thrillers don't shout. They tighten the room, dim the lights, and let silence do the damage. These films reward patience, punish distraction, and linger long after the credits roll. If you're craving tension that creeps rather than explodes, this list is where Prime truly delivers.